Everybody is telling you what's in the Protect College Sports Act. I want to do something different. I want to tell you what it means. Because after everything that happened this week, I think the PCSA has become something much bigger than one piece of legislation. It's about who is going to control college sports, who has the leverage, who gets the money, who writes the rules, and ultimately, who enforces them. And after this week, I'm not sure we're any closer to answering that question. I'm Mike Chaudron, and this is a special edition of Agent Confidential. What does the Protect College Sports Act really mean? Let's dive in. The SEC and Big Ten showed us where the power really lies. Earlier this week, the SEC and Big Ten came out in support of the Protect College Sports Act. That was a big deal. Ted Cruz called their support a game changer, and there's a reason for that. Congress needed them. I talked about this yesterday on WJOX Game Time with Kip Kiefer. Remember what Tony Petitti told us at Big Ten Media Days? He had spoken to Greg Sankey 5 times that morning, before breakfast. Those conversations weren't happening because they were discussing the weather. The two most powerful conferences in college athletics were negotiating. And look at what happened. The SEC and Big Ten protected their television money, they protected their flexibility around conference expansion, and they got stronger rules around NIL. Think about what that tells us. Congress may be writing legislation governing college sports, but the SEC and Big Ten had enough leverage to help shape what that legislation looked like before they would support it. That's power. And if you want to understand where college football is headed, don't just follow what people say, follow who has the leverage. But then Friday, things got really interesting. Florida Senator Ashley Moody introduced an amendment that would give Power 4 schools a 180-day window to reconsider their conference future without facing the 5-year penalty contemplated by the legislation. I said this yesterday on WJOX Game Time. You do that, and you create 180 days of absolute chaos. Think about the incentive you're creating. You're telling schools, okay, you've got a window, make your decision now, or potentially wait 5 years. What do you think athletic directors, university presidents, conference commissioners, television partners, and their lawyers are going to do? They're going to start making phone calls. In fact, they already have. Schools that weren't seriously considering moving may suddenly have to consider it because somebody else might. And once one school starts looking, another one has to, and then another one. That's how markets work. The deadline itself creates activity, and here's the irony. Congress is trying to bring stability to college sports, and one amendment could potentially create 180 days of instability right in the middle of football season. But here's the bigger problem. And this gets to what I think people are missing about the PCSA. The more Congress tries to create one national rule book for college sports, the more people show up wanting their own page in that rule book. It's exactly what I said yesterday. You've got the SEC, the Big Ten, the other conferences, the NCAA, the College Sports Commission, senators, congressmen, the AFL-CIO, the Congressional Black Caucus, individual schools, athletes, media companies, and don't forget, potentially private equity. Everybody has a different interest. Everybody has something they're trying to protect. And everybody understands there are billions of dollars involved. That's why this is so difficult. This isn't simply Congress fixes college sports. Congress is trying to create a national framework around an industry whose participants don't necessarily want the same things. And the SEC and Big Ten just demonstrated that the biggest players have enough leverage to demand protection for the things that matter to them most. And yet, we still haven't answered the most important question. I've been asking this from the beginning. Who's in charge? Let's say Congress passes the PCSA. Great. Congress can write the rules. But Congress isn't going to show up on a Tuesday afternoon because somebody thinks a school tampered with a quarterback. Congress isn't investigating an NIL deal. Congress isn't policing a collective. Congress isn't deciding whether somebody crossed a line in recruiting. So who does? The College Sports Commission? The NCAA? The conferences? Some combination of the three? And what happens when they disagree? That's the part I still don't think we've solved, because passing legislation and creating effective governance are two very different things. And college football's governance problem didn't begin this week. I've said this repeatedly. College football may be the only billion-dollar business where nobody can tell you who the CEO is. That's not just a good line, it's the fundamental problem. And yesterday's discussion on game time came right back to the same question. Even if the College Sports Commission receives some authority, somebody still has to actually administer and enforce these rules. So what does this mean for the SEC and Big Ten? This is where I think the story gets even bigger. I don't think the PCSA necessarily stops the long-term restructuring of major college football. It may actually tell us why restructuring is still very much possible, because we're still trying to govern Alabama, Ohio State, and Texas inside the same broad ecosystem that governs hundreds of institutions with completely different economics, different revenues, different television audiences, different athletic departments, different resources, and different priorities. That's quite a challenge. Kip and I talked yesterday about the possibility that eventually the biggest programs form something different. I've thought that for years we were headed towards some version of that. Maybe it's 48 schools. Maybe it's 60. I don't know the number. But the economic forces pushing the biggest brands together haven't disappeared. And critically, as we discussed yesterday, the version of the legislation we were discussing doesn't necessarily prevent that evolution. So don't look at the PCSA and think, okay, Congress passes this and realignment is over. I wouldn't make that assumption at all. Follow the money. Here's where I land. Don't get buried in every paragraph of every amendment. Watch the incentives. The SEC and Big Ten wanted protections before giving their support, and they got them. Florida Senator Ashley Moody looked at the conference movement provisions and said essentially, hang on a minute, now there's an amendment. Labor looks at the bill through one lens. Schools look at it through another. Conferences have their interests. Politicians have theirs. Television networks certainly have theirs. And everyone is trying to influence the final product. That's not necessarily sinister. That's how negotiations work. But it also tells you something important. The Protect College Sports Act isn't simply Congress deciding how college sports should operate. It's a negotiation among some extraordinarily powerful constituencies over who controls the next version of college athletics. And that's why September matters. Not because I'm sitting here predicting whether this bill passes or fails. I'm not. I'm watching what happens to it between now and the vote. Which amendments survive? Which ones disappear? Who gets another concession? Who threatens to walk? And who ultimately ends up with enforcement authority? Because when all of this is finished, the most important question won't be what's in the Protect College Sports Act. It'll be who won? Who gained power? Who gave some up? And did Congress actually create stability, or did it simply rearrange the pieces on the board? That's what I'll be watching. If you like what you hear here, hit that subscribe button. I'm Mike Chaudron. This is Agent Confidential, where I pull the curtain back on the business behind the game that we all love. I'll see you next time.